Welcome everyone for joining us today for our Tech for Good talk on a really special subject, one close to our hearts, on how tech can support humanitarian causes. So you will see, and if you were eager like myself and the other panelists, you would have seen I am joined by an amazing panel of experts here this afternoon. And I will be introducing you to everyone shortly, and we'll be diving into that panel discussion. We are going to kick off with some short introductions first, but please do remember that when we are doing that panel discussion, please ask lots of questions. We are here and open to answering questions. The panel have been prepped and they are very eager to be hearing your thoughts. So pop any burning questions that you have throughout in the Q&A channel, and we will get to those as soon as possible. So firstly, we're going to just do a little bit of a run through on the event and what you should expect throughout. So we're going to be kicking off with some introductions, telling you a bit about ourselves at Three-Sided Cube, why we're here, why we care so much, and our expertise in this space. Then, as I said, we're going to be diving straight into that panel discussion and getting you introduced to our amazing experts and really being able to understand their experience and hearing their thoughts on this particular subject, which we are very excited about. But firstly, who am I? So I'm Gabby. I head up commercial at Three-Sided Cube. I'm in the very privileged role of being able to speak to amazing people across the world that are trying to harness technology for good and helping them to kind of set them on the journey of achieving their mission. But we are a software development agency at Three-Sided Cube. We're based on the south coast of England in it's called Bournemouth. We specialize in software development as in mobile apps and digital platforms, but we are mission led. So our mission is to change millions of lives for the better. We achieve that mission by building tech for good, because technology is a super powerful tool with the potential for huge impact and reach. But the technology itself is agnostic. So the technology doesn't actually care if it's used for good or for bad. So we are very particular in the organizations that we work with and the types of projects that we work on, because we want to be able to use that technology and put it in the hands of people where they can have real positive impact and change lives for the better. We align with our wonderful clients who have the expertise, the knowledge, and the audiences to make sure that the tech that we're developing can really make a difference to people. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to our CEO, Rich, who's also on the call, who is going to be telling you a bit more about our passion and experience working in the for good space.
Thank you very much, Gabby. Yeah, hi, my name's Rich. I'm the CEO at Three-Sided Cube, and we've been around now for about 12 years, been working in the humanitarian sector for just over 10 years now. It's actually 11 years this year, was what we call our first humanitarian project. We've been lucky enough to work with some incredible organisations over that time, large and small. You can see here a few of the different organisations that we've worked with. Some are on the call now, so UNHCR, you'll hear from Lara later on the panel, doing some incredible work with refugees around the world. But smaller organisations as well, such as the Child Brain Injury Trust, who are an NGO based in the UK, about 30 people, and they're helping helping parents to manage their and navigate their way through the issues that arise when your child has a brain injury, which is quite a long-term process. So we work with small organisations like that all the way up to some of those bigger organisations you can see on there, such as the UN and the Federation of Red Crosses and the World Resources Institute, in a range of different types of applications. So some of the work we do for the WRI is connecting corporations and donors with organisations, smaller projects in areas where there is deforestation, so indigenous populations who are trying to restore their environment, and not just restore the environment for the environmental impact, but it also puts economic value into those areas as well by funding those projects not only does the project happen, but there's also a residual effect that has an impact on the wider organisation. So there's lots of different types of ways that we use technology to have an impact in this area. A particular project that I'd like to kind of talk about, and I won't go on too much because we do want to get to our wonderful panel, but one that's particularly kind of close to our heart is the work that we do with the IFRC and a lot of the individual Red Crosses around the world. And mainly because it was the first one that we really got involved with, which was a first aid project it started with the British Red Cross. So as I said, 11 years ago, they came to us and they wanted to digitize their first aid training manuals. There's a slide that this should go to. I'm not sure if Crystal can flip it on or not, but anyway, I will carry on regardless. Yeah, so they came to us to digitize their first aid training manuals. And what was really important for this 11 years ago was that the information was available offline. That was because they wanted to get that practical information to people in situations where you didn't necessarily have access to the internet, or actually a large book that you were carrying around on your person should you need to give the first aid in that instance. So if you were walking out in the woods in the New Forest or over the Purbex or something like that, and somebody had a heart attack, you didn't necessarily have a book or instant access to be able to look up how you would deliver that life-saving first aid. So an app seemed like a brilliant tool to use. It was a really good example of technology and the need coming along at the same time. So what mobile apps gave us the ability to do way back then was to have that information in your pocket. So you had the information required at the point of need. And we've used that kind of ethos of, as new technologies arise, using those to solve old problems throughout the time that we've been working in this sector. Hugely successful for us. It's had over 6 million downloads around the world. As I said, it started with the British Red Cross, but now it's available in 45 different languages in 87 countries around the globe. And it has been developed over that time and features added to it. So what started as something that could be used in an emergency soon became an educational tool. And we use various gamification techniques and nudge theory to build an application that can not just help you get first aid information at the point of need in an emergency, but also educate people about first aid when they're not necessarily in that situation. All of that part of it is aimed at giving people confidence to be able to deliver first aid when it's required. And again, mobile's a fantastic tool for doing that. So it's very good at changing people's behaviours, as sort of Gabby's pointed out earlier on. With mobiles, not always for the best way, but we certainly think that this is something where we can educate people and change people's behaviour in a very positive way. And just one last example that I wanted to give of as we've developed this product was in the first wave, but there was a migrant crisis sort of 5 years ago in the Syrian refugee crisis, where we had a large amount of people who were crossing borders. And at that point, Apple and Google had just released some new technologies that allowed the phone to know when it was changing location. So we could monitor as changes of locations happened. When the migrants crossed the border, we could provide them with new information about emergency services that were local to them. So wherever they had downloaded the app and whatever language they had downloaded it in, as they crossed the border, we could provide them with really vital contextual information as that happened to be able to keep them and their families safe as it went. As I said, it's hugely popular one for us. It's got all kinds of interesting technologies that have been used under the hood, but for the end users, is giving them really kind of vital and, in this case, life-saving information as we go. But enough about us and me talking about our case studies. What's really interesting about this event and what I can't wait to get into is the panel. So over to you, Gabs.
Amazing, thank you. So yes, as promised, let's get you introduced to our wonderful panel of experts who have joined us from an amazing range of not-for-profits and humanitarian organisations. So before we get those intros going, one final reminder, as I do like to remind everyone, please pop any questions you have in the Q&A channel. I will be keeping an eye on it, and I will make sure that they are fed into the panelists who will be sticking around to answer those questions. So without further ado, firstly, thank you, all of you, for joining us today for a discussion that I'm super excited to be having with all of you. And I'm going to kick off with the first person on my screen, because it's always fairest to go in the first way. Otherwise, anyone thinks you have favorites, which absolutely I do not, because I love each and every one of you and your organizations. So Lara, could you please kick us off with introducing yourself and a bit more about UNHCR, please?
Yes, thank you, Gabby, and thank you, Rich. Thanks for having me. So my name is Lara Schlotterbeck, and I'm the head of fundraising campaigns here in UNHCR, based in sunny Copenhagen at the moment. I've been working with Three-Sided Cube for a few years now, and I'll come on to that a little bit later in terms of what we've been working on in terms of tech for good. But UNHCR is a global organization. We're mandated to protect people who've fled war or persecution, people who've been displaced, so refugees, internally displaced people, and people who are stateless. And we work in 137 countries around the world, and we have about 18,000 staff. Primarily, the majority are working in the field directly with the people that we serve. So my role with UNHCR is around raising funds and engaging the public and mobilizing the public. So, we depend heavily on voluntary donations to do our work, and the private sector individuals are so crucial to supporting our work and enabling our work. And we're seeing tremendous falls in reductions in budget from governments. So we're depending even more on the private sector. So individuals are absolutely key, people like you and me, to make those donations. But also part of my work is around looking at attitudes towards refugees. And I think, we've seen some very negative attitudes recently. We've seen the role the media plays in that. So it's also about really making sure we're giving out really accurate information around refugees, what they've been through, to build that empathy, compassion, and direct engagement. So really looking forward to taking part in this panel. Thank you.
Amazing. Wow. So many questions already, and it's just incredible. I'm looking forward to diving into all of that further. And Kashif, you are next on my list. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about Muslim Aid, please?
Hey, Gabby. Thank you, Gabby. Thank you, Rich, for the invitation. My name is Kashif Shabir. I'm the CEO of Muslim Aid. Muslim Aid is one of the oldest faith-based organizations or faith-driven organizations. We've been registered in UK now for over 37 years. And we're a global NGO. We work in not as many countries as Lara, but about 20 odd countries. I'm pleased to say, though, that the UNHCR is a partner of ours in many of those places, just like a lot of the other larger UN institutions that we work very closely with. About half of our support comes from places like the UN, the other half comes from individual donors and directly from the public. We specialize in WASH, education, especially education for young girls, and health. And we largely are in places which quite frankly are vulnerable states. So places that other charities may shy away from, either because of the political climate or some of the man-made issues or in those areas. And we're quite proud of that. So, places like Yemen, Syria, Sudan, Somalia, Palestine, we've been in some of those places for over 20 years now. We started off around about the same time as the whole Ethiopian famine and Bob Geldof campaigns and so on and so forth. And we're quite proud to say that, you know, we enter these places and we tend to stay because, as we all know, real change takes time, you know. So emergency relief is emergency relief, and that is a big part of our work. But if you really want to change people's lives, if you want to give them some chance of actually surviving longer than that emergency, then you need to hang around. And Muslim Aid is proud to say that in most of those countries, we do hang around and try to put in programs, long-term development programs that try to get people back onto their feet. So that's livelihoods, a lot of livelihood for women programs, you know, providing them with the tools to get them into business, maybe provide a value chain where they can go on and sell their products to larger consortiums and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's it. I've been permanent CEO now or full-time CEO now for about 2 years. I was interim CEO for about a year, a bit before that. And we're based in London, in East London is our headquarters. And then obviously we have country offices in half a dozen other places. So that's us. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you. I mean, very humbling hearing all this, and it's incredible. So thank you so much for your time today. And Dirag from Big Family 360, please tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization.
Thank you, Gabi. It's another wonderful opportunity again to meet everyone. Just like you said, my name is Dirag Samuel. The Executive Director of Big Family 360 Foundation. It's a non-profit organization based in Nigeria that is providing social integrated services to women, orphans, and vulnerable children. And what we basically do, we try to leverage our technology to improve access to humanitarian services. So we develop mobile application that allows vulnerable women and survivors of gender-based violence to access services from their immediate community by simply creating that linkage between the survivors and the service providers that are within their community, cutting across police, the legal services, and also health facilities that are providing free or discounted services to such survivors. And we also work in the education sector as well, where we identify out-of-school children and we enroll them back to school because we have so many of them in Nigeria. The recent statistic given by UNICEF, it's around 80 million now of out-of-school children. So we also work in that sector. So, but generally as a youth-led organization, we try to innovate by basically leveraging on technology to improve access to humanitarian and development services. And the app that we developed is one of our innovation, and we are also hoping to keep innovating and pivoting as well to ensure that these services are accessed easily. Thank you so much, and over from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. It's very exciting to have people already utilizing technology in such amazing ways, and we will be discussing that more as we go through the panel discussion. And last but definitely not least, Alam from Migrant Leaders, please tell us more about yourself and your wonderful organization.
Thank you very much, Gabby, and thank you, Rich. My name is Elham Fardad. I'm really pleased to be here today. I'm the founder and CEO of the charity Migrant Leaders. I launched Migrant Leaders 5 years ago, but prior to that, I came from a very corporate background. I spent 23 years as a finance director in large corporates in GE, News Corp, and Ernst & Young as a finance director. I launched Migrant Leaders 5 years ago as a charity because I stumbled across a problem that I thought, since my time as a young migrant growing up in Birmingham, I thought the problem had improved, and I realized it hadn't. The Parker Review looked at, back in 2017, looked at the ethnic diversity of UK corporates. And the numbers were really not great. And knowing what we know about the root causes of lack of ethnic diversity in UK corporates and around the world, I realized that given the complexity of this problem, I think we all need to do more for diversity and inclusion. So I launched Migrant Leaders as a charity back in 2017. And where we are today, what do? We have over 1,000 senior mentors from 95 FTSE 100 and leading firms. We match the mentors based on the sector and technical aspiration and development needs of the young mentees. And the mentees are between 16 and 25, predominantly first and second generation young migrants in the UK. So we really help them succeed in the UK in personally and in their careers and education, so that successful young migrants can grow to fulfill their potential, contribute to Britain, and have a voice. And we also have big corporate partnerships with companies such as ABB, Anglo American, Kantar, BP, and many others. So we develop insight days, internships, work experiences, and we give these big opportunities and deep relationships to the young mentees on our Migrant Leaders Development Program. And very excited to hear more today about how everyone leverages technology to accelerate their social impact.
Thank you so much. Thank you. When I said we had a panel of experts, I definitely wasn't lying there. I mean, wow, there's incredible experience and balance on what all your organizations doing and making such a positive impact on the people of this planet. So thank you, first of all, from everyone. But we've got a quite big question to kick off with. So it is the dream, I suppose, of everyone that's mission-led, but the dream of every humanitarian organisation that their work one day is going to no longer be required. So in terms of that mission and that vision and how you achieve that, I just wanted to sort of start with a large question really around how you all think, and do you think that technology can help us all get to that point where we no longer need to have missions or visions and you can all say tick, done, we did it, kind of thing, which I know is a big question, having come from the charity sector myself. It's something that everyone is thinking about, but it's a very quick question. So it's the dream of every humanitarian organization for their work to no longer be required. So do you think tech can help us get to that day? I am going to start with you, Lara, because again, you are fast on the screen. So do you think technology can help us to get to that day?
I definitely think technology can help us get to that day. But I think, you know, for UNHCR, if conflict and displacement continue, then UNHCR is absolutely imperative to support people who need to be protected because they're fleeing war or persecution. And the latest figures we released, sadly, in May, was the 100 million people are now displaced, which is a real record high. So, you know, we as an organization, we work with people who've lost everything. And in order to work with those people, we need people. We need those warm hands, you know. The 90%, as I said, of our staff are in the field working directly with refugees and IDPs. So I think that part is absolutely key. However, I think there is a real sweet spot in terms of the combination of people, that human touch, that humanity, and technology. And I think technology is the enabler. You know, it helps us be much more efficient. It helps us to innovate, to find solutions. And I think that's where we're really seeing that sweet spot, that combination of the two. And I think this is so important. I mean, it's been important in the past, but I think particularly now, where, you know, for UNHCR or across the whole sector, certainly we're seeing a big shortfall in funding. We're seeing trust waning in institutions, and we're seeing a tremendous need. So I think, you know, technology and people power, you know, I think that is really the future.
Amazing. Yeah, it very much reminds me of what we often say on these talks, whatever the kind of topic is that we're discussing, that technology has a very important part to play. It is a piece of a much bigger puzzle. But as you say, that importance to see it as enabler and part of a much bigger picture in terms of how you see it influencing and supporting the amazing work that you do at UNHCR. And for migrant leaders, I'm shaking it up a bit now, so you know everyone can stay on their toes and alert. So for migrant leaders, is that similar? Does that ring true to you, Alam, in terms of how you see technology supporting you to achieve your mission?
It does, and I would add to the points that Lara very eloquently made regarding efficiency, technology enabling us to deliver the benefits to our beneficiaries more efficiently, faster, better, as bigger scale, that is definitely the case for migrant leaders. But in addition, we want to leverage technology to transform the experience of our beneficiaries, to give them things that they wouldn't, and offerings and benefits that they wouldn't otherwise get without using technology as an enabler, to Lara's words. So we want to transform the experience of the beneficiaries. We want to transform the experience of the corporate partners in working with migrant leaders, so that, as I always say, for us to innovate as a charity and to be at the forefront of using technology for innovation as migrant leaders.
It's amazing. So in terms of how you can add that additional experience and access, I think that's really, really key in terms of giving everyone an equal playing field to how they can access resources is really, really key. Lovely words coming out here already. Love. And for Muslim Aid, similar, different, kind of how do you see, Kashif, technology supporting you?
Thanks. Sorry. Yeah, no, thank you. I think the point about the enabler and tech being a part of a bigger toolbox that NGOs have. I think what we've seen, and I guess maybe just make it a bit more real, like as regards what's happening currently, is I think there's not, that we just have to be aware of making general statements now with the way that humanitarian work has developed across the world. Things are just a lot more complex than even humanitarian work 10 years ago, 5 years ago. You know, and just to pick out a few examples, when we're saying that, yes, of course, tech has a part to play. And I think the very fact that all of us are joined on this call over a webinar, sitting from our homes and sharing our experiences. I mean, I think tech has a part to play. I think what the humanitarian sector struggles with continuously is what part does it actually play? What problems is a tech problem and what problem is a people problem, like Lara quite pointed out, and which one of those issues, you know, stride both sides, like, you know, that need both. My background is in CRM development. I mean, I moved over a long time ago. And even the main part of my job when I joined the Red Cross was actually to take care of a CRM project. It was a tech project that they brought me on for. And what you find is that, you know, there was a couple of areas there that had nothing to do with technology. You know, it was the adoption of that technology, the training of that technology, removing obstacles to change, and changing people's mindsets around that technology. You know, no one was against Dynamics. Sorry, I threw out a vendor name, but no one was against the supply. No one was against actual tech. You know, it's what does that tech actually bring to the organization? What problem is it actually trying to solve? That is normally the problem. You know, getting rid of people's fears about what jobs it might take away or enhance, and making sure you're communicating those out properly. And then, like, regarding the uniformity, I think the approach, just because how, like, you know, if I look at Afghanistan now, we've gone back about 20 years. So you think you've got to a point where things are in place, processes are in place, systems are in place, you're ready to move to the next level, and bang, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's over again. Where does technology now? It's not the same as yesterday, because the situation just completely changed and it's turned it around. Inflation has gone to 124% in some of those places, 100%. So I think it's just about realizing that even the humanitarian sector is just moving so fast now. The problems and solutions to those problems are a lot more complex than they used to be even 5 years ago. You're not going into countries, dropping off aid and flying back out. You're normally staying there for a while. We've got protracted emergencies like Syria and Yemen that have been going on for a decade now, over a decade. You know, what part does technology play to that compared to fundraising, compared to program management, monitoring? So I think it's just about understanding that the issues in humanitarian work are quite complex now, and depending on the place that you're in, that technology and where you are on the maturity level of that technology changes quite rapidly. Like I said, Afghanistan is a good example. We were somewhere in, like, literally 9 months ago, 12 months ago? And suddenly we think now we're like 10 years behind again, and we're starting all over again. So I think That's some of my thoughts, I think, add to what the panel have already said.
Hey, I think that's amazing, and the complexity of the issues. I think it's really important that we note that and we understand that for this discussion, because when you say it like that, it is really broad and vast as well. What the different types of beneficiaries you're supporting, the different types of countries as well. And I think a really important thing there is that working against the problem. What is the problem? Always starting with the problem before any technology is even discussed is really, really key. And I think, just stay on that for a second, not just for the organizations, not just for anyone listening that's looking at organization wide technology that's going to make your life easier. It's also if there's any users involved in that, really thinking what the issue is, how you're trying to impact them. And then working on the technology from that is really, really powerful. Again, having come from the charity sector, sounds like we had some similar experiences with some of those internal technologies. And I'm sure other people that are joining us today, that will definitely sound familiar to what they've lived through as well. So really, really interesting point there. And for Big Family 360, it's utilizing technology so interestingly already, and it plays a big part in how you achieve your mission. So, can you tell us a bit more about that and how you see technology being able to help you achieve your mission, Jirag, in that wider sense?
Thank you once again. I think basically technology is getting us closer to that bigger vision of transforming lives. And that is because it is helping us to make things easier, accessible, and efficient at the same time. And at the same time, saving cost at the long run. And then for me personally, whenever I talk about technology, I don't just see it as a digital technology alone, because when you mention technology, people's attention shift to digital technology. We can be able to use to reduce the workload. Actually, it's technology because it is making work easier. So, for us in Big Family 360, what we've done over time, we are the first organization in Nigeria that introduced that mobile application that connects survivors of gender-based violence to service providers. So in a major way, it is transforming the protection sector entirely now, because people can literally see that survivors now, they don't really have to depend on social workers that are from their community or members of the community that can judge them because they open up that I was violated by a particular person. But then now through technology, they can access service providers that provide them with the necessary services that they need free of charge, and also help them to access justice at the same time. So it is really helping us, because one of our desires in Big Family Foundation, especially in the Northeast here, where patriarchy is the order of the day, and then there is a lot of protection issues and concern. So one of the things that was driving us is the possibility of giving survivors that right to access services free of charge or at discounted rate. And then those people can help them from the community where they are coming from. And those people are good enough not to judge them, because that's what they are doing, especially targeting social workers and NGOs that are working in those communities, and also government partners, including police, where we identify gender desk officers that are well trained to respond to gender-based violence issues. So it is, first of all, cutting cost for us. Secondly, making service delivery efficient. And it is also coordinating and facilitating services at the same time by identifying what partner, who is doing what and where, the 5W. So it is much way easier, and it is really kind of one of the mechanisms that we are presently using and trying to scale up to get us closer to the big dream, to our vision and also mission at the same time. So for us and for me, I think it's a big yes, that yes, technology is getting us to that very particular place. that our services as humanitarian agencies will no longer be needed because we are using technology to close that very gap and the possible divide between bigger agencies and the service providers or beneficiaries that they are targeting. Yeah, thank you, and over.
In terms of like efficiencies and reducing costs, but also in terms of like integrating and making it easier for services to be navigated by people, and also for those services to understand presumably what the specific skill sets are of each other and work more efficiently and effectively together as well. So it's a really interesting use of technology, and a really interesting one, I think, again, that harks back to that, what's the problem you're trying to solve and how can you use it in the most effective way that then enables people to head towards those missions and obviously that positive impact. So it's a very wonderful start and lots of food for thought already from this conversation. And Rich, just to, bring you into the conversation a bit, as you've been at CUBE for quite a while, we don't have to say how many years. You've been at CUBE, you've seen lots of humanitarian projects come through in terms of how you believe technology can help humanitarian organizations to achieve their mission. What kind of thoughts have you got around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the guys have sort of covered off a lot of the, a lot of the points already. Where technology is good for anything, so like scale or connectivity or scalable communication, it works really, really well across any of the humanitarian causes. What's a real what I've sort of seen is that there's a definite kind of technological divide between the north and the south of the globe. But what you can do if you deploy the right technology correctly is it can be a real balancer. We have a particular project that I can think of. It's a little bit more in the environmental space, but it's where there's indigenous people in the forests of Madagascar and Brazil that we've given them the power of kind of mobile technology to help them protect their habitat against the likes of some quite large organizations that are perhaps treating it not as well as they should. But what those people can do is they can use GPS satellite technology and mobile phone technology and cellular connectivity to have a voice in the conversation. And that ability to give them that voice through the power of technology is kind of, it's a really, it's an amazing thing, and it can have a real impact. What I think is kind of is interesting and is almost, this is kind of it's almost a question for everybody really, is that ability for the for good sector to be able to provide that kind of technology and implement these really quite powerful things, but make sure it's done in the correct way and an ethical way. If you look at things like machine learning and artificial intelligence and the world of algorithms and how they can control our lives to a certain extent, when you look at how those can be implemented, they're incredible tools for being able to very rapidly have impact on people's lives at a very large scale. But there's a very big ethical question around that as well, particularly when you look at it in this particular sector and you think of it in terms of surveillance. So surveillance can be great to understand how people that are displaced are how that works and how that moves in the wrong hands might not be so good. So that's a really difficult thing to weigh up, which I think is true across, as I said, all of the for good world. It's that kind of balance of, you've got to get the real sweet spot between innovation and ethics, if you like, because you can use the tools. They're very, very powerful and can give you an incredible advantage in the world. But what you can't do is chuck the baby out with the bathwater. So you do have to get that right. And it's quite an interesting thing to think how you do that. Stuff like connectivity, for instance. So you've got companies like Facebook and Elon Musk is trying to connect the entire world to the internet, and they will do that for free. But then, do you want Mark Zuckerberg being in charge of everyone's connection to the internet? I don't know. That's other people to wonder. But it's a really fascinating area for me. So, but I wouldn't want to put anyone off innovating, because it is a really, that's
Absolutely.
how you have the big impact.
It's powerful though, and it's very important to understand the technological power of things and the responsibility people have in using it. For anyone that watches a few of our Tech for Good talks, you will hear that it's very often that Rich will bring up Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, or ethics. So, just you got to throw them in. You got to give the people what they want. They would expect nothing less. So thank you for that. I'm going to pick out a few. We've got a couple of questions now, which I think link directly to what's already been discussed. I know we were speaking about the ever-changing landscape of humanitarian and the causes that you all support, and how that changes so quickly from reactive and kind of crisis mode, and when things are changing, to the more proactive streams of work that you can do to help the ongoing causes that you're supporting and the ongoing need that's out there. So one thing that occurs is how can I suppose technology be used to support humanitarian causes in that transition to more proactive, and does it have its uses in reactive? So it's kind of a broader question, and there may be areas that each of you feel more comfortable answering specifically. But yeah, in terms of that ever-shifting environment for you, and how tech can be used to make humanitarian support, I suppose, more proactive, and where its role is in your organization. So Kashif, I'm going to come to you, because I think it was you that mentioned this in the first place. So I'm going to throw it over to you as a starter.
Yeah, I'll have a shot. So I think, like I said, there is a place for tech. I think what we're seeing with things like global warming happening and stuff like that, some of the man-made crises, wars, and all the political situations, like I said, there's a lot of things that are developing now that, quite frankly, we're too late in the game tech-wise to do anything proactive with those things now, right? So those things are going to transpire. War's going to rise. We've got more floods in countries, so thus creating more humanitarian responses in those places, and so on and so forth. I think what we need to do is maybe touch a bit on what Rich said, is how do we now, knowing these things are in play, basically, is that how do we get that awareness? How do we use tech now to share the data, make common repositories where people can access information, where we can share information across the sector easier? I think that's where, on the humanitarian side, especially on emergency response, on the reactive side, that's where we are, because like I said, I think we've missed a boat on trying to offset these things. We ain't got enough wind farms to save our energy crisis. We ain't got enough dams to stop the water flowing. But what we do have is an opportunity to share the information we do have quicker, faster, across our organizations, make central repositories, knowledge sharing, events like this, where people are coming together and sharing ideas. I personally, I think that's the critical point that we're at now as a sector, if we want to take advantage of, and if we can show, and there's some good examples. I mean, like even on climate change, right? Like, there's so many pots of information. I'm sure Lara has hers. With the UNHCR, I have where I go to find out, okay, what's the situation with Bangladesh floods over the next 15, 10 years, 20 years, and how does that response change for us, etc. Capacity building, resources in the country. Could we bring those sources of information together? Could we make them easily accessible? Could we make them easily understandable? For a CEO to look at and say, oh, okay, I know what that means, and I don't need another scientist to kind of read it out for me and interpret the data. So I personally feel that's where the crossroads are right now, because of all of this stuff that's already in play. We might not be able to stop the global warming, but we could share what impact that's going to have across our various organizations and countries and borders. I think that's another big one. If I could just leave with one more example, like, we're dealing with this flood situation in Pakistan, as you've all seen. Now, there was a flood situation in Pakistan previously, which is largely to do with the border situation with India. And obviously when they open and close their dams on the border, and what flooding that causes. Now, that is just a sharing of information problem in a timely manner, you know.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's a sharing of information problem in a timely manner, and both sides. I'm not saying it will get rid of the flooding. Don't get me wrong, but our preparedness plans, our response plans could be mitigated a lot better, or put in place a lot better, if you knew the timing of those opening and closing of those situations. So yeah, I think stuff like that we've still got a good chance of making use of. But yeah.
I think it's really powerful, and it's something that definitely technology is really good for, like the data, right? You get loads of data, you can that's amazing. But I think that point around making the data digestible, easily understandable, is absolutely key as well, because having a load of data that you can't navigate and you can't use that power of it to make positive change is as useless as not having the data. So it's really powerful, these two things. And I think technology and its ability to track data and share analytics and be able to understand and prevent and preparedness is really, really powerful. And for you, Lara, UNHCR, is that similar? It's interesting that kind of shift more around the need to be reactive, because some of the proactive large problems that we should have fixed or could have maybe fixed have maybe passed slightly, and that need to be reactive and utilize what data and what technology is out there to support. Is that similar for you at UNHCR?
Yes, it is. No, I really acknowledge the points that Kashif has made. I mean, I would say there are definitely entry points at kind of all stages. So before a crisis, in terms of crisis preparedness, as Kashif said, also during, and I think some of the points that Rich, you made about responsiveness during a crisis and how tech can really help us improve and accelerate the way we respond. But also importantly, that phase afterwards, the rebuilding phase and the measurement evaluation phase, what would we do differently next time? So I think there are definitely entry points throughout the whole trajectory of a crisis. I also think from a personal perspective, and within UNHCR, within my area of work, tech can play a huge role in terms of public engagement and direct engagement of individuals. And so, for example, with the Ukraine crisis, we had so many donors there was an outpouring of giving, of emotion, of people connecting with the crisis, with the images of refugees fleeing their homes. And so many people gave. And I think the question really for us and for many in the sector is, how do we keep these people engaged with future crises that are happening, or those that are outside of the media spotlight, the Yemens, the Syrias? How do we keep them engaged so that they really are connected to the cause, and it's less of a transaction, but more of a connection? And I think Elam earlier talked about transforming an experience. So I think tech can play a really pivotal role in terms of transforming the supporter experience, as well as the refugee experience. And this is something that we've been working on with Three-Sided Cube, with our app Connecting Worlds, which really takes out the filter of UNHCR talking on behalf of the people we serve, but actually connects donors directly with refugees so that they share their own stories and they connect based on things that they have in common, as mothers, fathers, as individuals. And we've seen such a really positive, really positive results with this app. So it does raise funds as well, but beyond that, it shifts attitudes, it creates really genuine connections. And I think, one of our objectives in that was to sort of build also sustainable income for refugees for underfunded areas, but also to ensure that we build a meaningful experience for both. And we did extensive research with refugees beforehand, back to Richard's point about ethics. We don't want to impose something. So we did extensive research, and we have a whole board who are involved in the development of the app. And it's just been such an incredible experience. So I mentioned that in response to your question, to say that about engaging individuals who can support and sustain our work during a crisis, and bringing them on board early so that we have those people who are motivated and mobilized beforehand.
Yeah, it's that perfect mix, right, between the proactive work that you can do with that foresight that you're going to need to be reactive in a crisis, and a crisis is going to happen. And I think that's really powerful in terms of those examples on both sides of how technology can play, as we say, a role, not necessarily solve everything. Unfortunately, we wish it was that easy, but part of that bigger piece of the puzzle of how you can work towards supporting more widely. And for migrant leaders, in terms of your work, and you were speaking earlier about the incredible work that you do in the amount of corporates and migrants that you have working along the program, do you see it as the technology being able to support the proactive, the longer term change that you're looking to create at migrant leaders? It feels slightly more there, but is there a reactive nature as well? I will hand over to you, Alan.
I would say I would echo what Kashif said in terms of being proactive, and what Laura said in terms of going beyond efficiency, really transforming the experiences of the stakeholders. So Migrant Leaders is definitely a very proactive organization and very innovative, because, and I think that's the source of that innovation comes from the cross-sector collaboration, where we are working with public sector, charity sector, and all the corporate partners. That cross-sector collaboration has created a lot of innovation. And what I'd like to think is that every organization, whether a company or a charity, they have to be very aware of the core source of their value proposition. For migrant leaders, our core value proposition is the corporate collaborations, opportunities, and deep relationships that we bring from our corporate connection. So to that extent, we should really look after our corporate volunteers, corporate partners, and to keep innovating, because that's what they would like to see, a really smooth corporate volunteer experience, linking what Migrant Leaders does to the objectives of those corporate partners, making the mentor experience really really smooth and comfortable, and at the same time doing all that to achieve our final objective, which is to help the young mentees achieve their career ambitions and to help them feel supported in their lives. So we keep going back every day to what is our core objective as an organization, and how do we look after the stakeholders who are supporting our core value proposition as an organization. If we keep pivoting every day towards that, then technology can help us.
Yeah, it's really, really, really important. We call it a North Star. We often refer internally at, Laura's nodding her head because she's probably sick to death of us talking about North Stars. But yeah, it's very much that. I mean, why, why are we doing this? Who are we doing it for? What is the purpose? And like harking back to that in every aspect, not just with technology. I think just generally in the mission-led organizations that we work in, that's what we have to do, right? Because it is a changing landscape all the time, but particularly with technology, if you can look at that, and again, it harks back to the problems that we were talking about, what problems you're trying to solve. Again, it's really powerful advice, and definitely a tip that we would be sharing as well, and then helping to go towards that aim, whether it be proactive or reactive, in terms of what is it that the organization is about. And for Big Family 360 is utilizing technology, and it feels like it's very much at the heart of Big Family 360 and why it exists in terms of how it's going to achieve that mission. Would presumably the technology you're using is very much both to support a proactive and a reactive, but if you can tell us a bit more about how you see it supporting the cause, that would be great. Thank you, Durai.
Thank you so much. Great contribution from everyone. It's amazing. For us, aside from improving access to services as well, we are trying to see how we can leverage on technology to serve as early warning, like response mechanism. So in a way, just like Kashif mentioned, I feel if we can have such early warning response systems and mechanism, especially on technology, it will really help us for preparedness and also prevention. And this will really inform how we respond and also react to humanitarian crisis. So it's for us, we are also trying to envision and see the possibility whereby we can have such mechanism by simply leveraging on our skills and what we can do and the resources available for us to try, pilot, and then test at the same time to see if these things can actually change how we respond to humanitarian crisis and also react. But for us, this is a work in a process, and we keep pivoting actually as we see, we learn, and then we monitor, and then we improve, and also find a way of making it really better. So in a way, we don't really approach humanitarian crisis like the usual way. Just like Ashif mentioned earlier, he said humanitarian response is becoming super complex now. It's not the usual way. When I started, it's absolutely different now. Immediately after the COVID crisis, everything changed from every sector. So for me, I feel it's a privilege for humanity, because this is really testing our intelligence as human beings, that we can virtually manage and respond to crises very well despite the situation, because everything has changed. And then this is really on us now as superior beings to see how we can leverage on whatever that we have to respond to humanitarian crisis. So for us at this level, this is what we are looking at, and also paying our attention, and also trying to see how we can mobilize more resources to invest, and also see how we can navigate through this process to respond to humanitarian crisis efficiently with also lesser cost. Thank you, and over.
I think that's really interesting. And I think, again, with technology, it isn't that kind of fire and forget, going to fix all the problems. It is that, it is a moving landscape. Like, the world is moving and changing all the time, and how you use innovation to continuously improve and respond to different needs as well. So I think that's really powerful and really interesting from that previous experience. In terms of a reminder, if there is any questions, this is like your last chance to get those questions in. I'm super conscious of time. And this is always the difficulty when you have such an amazing panel that you just want to talk to for days and days on end. So I am going to ask probably the final question in terms of getting everyone around the room. And then if there is any last questions which drip feed in, we will get those across to you. One of the particular, again, I think it was Kashif, you mentioned it, with your experience of the challenges of implementing technology in organizations. I kind of just wanted to do a quick fire across the panel around the challenges you've experienced in implementing new technology, and any kind of tips for anyone listening that might be going on that journey that you could share. So I'm going to whiz around the room in order. Lara, could you kick us off with any challenges and your top tips for anyone about to embark on a technical journey?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think Richard's point about ethics is the one that just comes up very strongly for me. Certainly working with an organization like ours, I speak for the UN perhaps, we've got to go quite gently. We need to test things. We need to pilot things. So I like Dirk's point about pivoting and course correcting. That is something, with our project with you, we worked very slowly with a small group, tested, amended things, adjusted things, and then continued. So we need to make sure that we're minimizing risk and we're bringing people along as we go. I think process is absolutely key in a large complex organization, bringing along stakeholders who may be nervous or reticent. So consultation, so I've sort of got pilot, consultation is key, both with internal stakeholders, but also with the people that we serve, ensuring that everyone's voice is heard, that it's a really participatory process. It does add a layer on top of your development process, but it is one that is so crucial to success. Final 2 points I'd make is around inclusion and making sure that whatever product is developed or how the tech is used is inclusive, and we have not, there are not any communities who are excluded and that we haven't considered. So if we're focusing on urban areas, are there people in rural areas who do not have connectivity, etc., who we're excluding? And finally, and probably most importantly, is protection of refugees in our organization, making sure that we're creating something that is safe and secure, and that we've taken all the measures for data protection. So, really, really important things that mean that we're a little slower. We slow down the process, but it also means that if you're working with an organization like ours, once you've worked on the tech together, that will be hopefully really embedded within the organization.
Really, really powerful, and making sure whatever development partner you're working with can align to that, you know, understanding what your needs are and being able to ensure that someone has the process, the skills, the people to take that journey with you, I think is really powerful, and some really amazing things that were pulled out there. Thank you, Lara. And Kashif, challenges and top tips from you?
Yeah, I think for anyone that is collecting money from the general public, you're not going to get away from the fact that public want to see most of that money go directly to the beneficiary, and so that's a continuous education piece that you need to have with your donors. But in general, I'd say creating a good business case, good old-fashioned business case to your trustees, to your donors, that look, we're going to invest in this because we think if we do, we're going to get more of your pound out to the beneficiary. We're going to save money over here. We're going to be more efficient over there. I think we need to, as charities, which we're not very good at because we don't normally come from those backgrounds, but to make a good ROI, make a good business case for an investment, donors are willing to get behind, especially private individuals or business CSR individuals that understand how businesses are run a little bit more intimately. But I think a good strong business case to your donors, that to your own board. Yeah, so a lot of the time, you know, we have voluntary board members. They also want to see a lot of your money go directly to beneficiaries. Making that case to them that, hey, look, you know, if you free up some of this cash for us, what we're saying is it will translate into this much more money or this much more efficiency or this percentage of thing. I don't think we do that well enough, and I think it's really hard as a CEO. I can tell you. It's really hard for CEOs, for board members to turn down well-done, well-researched business cases for technology. It's hard. Make it hard for us. I guess that's my take. Make it difficult for us to say no. There's no CEO out there that's going to say, hey, by the way, you know what? If you give me 10 grand, I'll make you another 100. Or if you give me another 10 grand, I'll increase your gift aid by another 2%. You know, that translates into this. See, you know, make it difficult for the CEO to say no. I don't think we do that enough. I think we give too much opportunity to CEOs to question whether it's a good investment, and as soon as they start to question, you're already on a slippery slope, and that money is going to get diverted quite quickly to the next appeal or campaign or whatever it is.
I love that. I love that. Just make CEOs' lives harder, but by not being able to say no. That's what we're saying. I'm here for that. I'm here for that. We're going to channel that at you. And Dirag, for you, challenges, top tips for anyone about to go on their technical journey as someone that's been on it yourself.
Yeah, I think I'll just refer to what Lara said initially about inclusion. You know, when we started testing, we targeted the community of people living with disability. So it was a huge case, especially for people living with disability, to access technological services, especially in a situation whereby you have someone who cannot, for example, read, or maybe the person is deaf or dumb, sorry for saying that, cannot hear or talk. So it was like very difficult for us to navigate through that part by including people living with disability in our design. But in the process, we learned, and then we introduced what can enable them to use our services and access our tools. So I think it's one of the key challenges that most humanitarian agencies do have, and as well we've had that experience, but in a way we were able to navigate successfully to have them on board. And then I think secondly, again, it's I think a perception also of people, like especially humanitarian agencies, thinking that using technology is just for tech startups, and it appears as if adapting to that is just another way of not serving people. So these are some of the challenges, especially to get the buy-in of other humanitarian agencies, especially bigger agencies, that this is what we are doing. Can we do this together, scale it up? So it was one of our key challenges, and we are navigating and then trying to see how we can keep pushing and serve the community at our best. Thank you.
Amazing. Yeah, truly powerful. And last but not least, challenges and advice from migrant leaders. Alan, what can you kind of share with us?
I think in this context, and for technology projects in this context, I have 3 levers of success in mind. Really, these are scope, process, and users. So when it comes to scope, I think the traditional phrase, don't try to boil the ocean. There are some things that are must-haves when it comes to scope, because they're so fundamental to the proposition of the technology project or the app that you're developing. Know clearly what your must-haves are, given the value proposition of your organization and the purpose of that technology project. But don't try to boil the ocean. Be very clear about scope and prioritize things. Then process. I love it when it comes to CEOs. People often assume that there's a trade-off between being a visionary and a big picture person versus being a detailed person. People ask me that question all the time. You're such a visionary, you had the vision for migrant leaders and you see the big picture. And actually, I'm a detail-oriented process expert. I've shown that throughout my 23-year career. I don't see a trade-off. I think a good CEO is someone who does have a vision and sees the roadmap and knows how to navigate the organization there. But when needed, they can roll up their sleeves, get involved with the detail, know the process, because when it comes to tech projects, the devil is in the detail. If you get some of the detail wrong, your big picture is not going to save you. So process and detail is very important in technology projects. And we have that in mind, of course, for migrant leaders. And then probably the most important thing as ever is the users, the customer. So to really think about how will the user feel in using this product, essentially? How will that process and customer experience feel for the users? And user adoption. I could design the most amazing migrant leaders app with you guys, but if we don't have the user adoption strategy in mind, the product is only going to be as good as the usage that the users want to do. So we have to always have the user adoption and user experience in mind. So to me, those are the 3 levers of success that I have in my mind that will pivot me every day in working on migrant leaders technology projects.
Amazing. Well, look, thank you all. I think there's some really powerful discussion there, but some really amazing top tips. Like if we were gonna give our top tips, I think you all said it as like perfectly in what we would say, keeping users at the heart, that stakeholder buy-in, that process around it, that's that business case, that ROI, that understanding what everyone needs in order to create a successful application is absolutely gold dust. So hopefully everyone who's joined us today has learned something valuable, can take that to their own organizations and really make some positive change along with everyone that's joined us today. Thank you to all our panelists for giving their time this afternoon, sharing their experience and their expertise with us. And we thank you all very, very much and hope to see you again soon for an upcoming talk. Just before we go, I just wanted to highlight to everyone that our next Tech for Good talk will be hosted by our US colleagues. So it will be Puff and Dana that will be focusing on how data can solve the climate crisis. So a great one there and lots of things we talked about today around data. So if you want to learn a bit more, join Puff and Dana on the 29th of September at 11 a.m. EST. So for our UK viewers, that will be at 4 p.m. But Rich and I will be back next month for our next virtual Tech for Good talk on the 25th of October, where we will be looking at the future of fundraising. So a really big topic and one that's come up a lot here in the discussion today about how you can take those donors on journeys with you and how obviously technology can play a role in that. Big news, big announcement. I need like alerts. We are actually going to be hosting an in real life event in London in November, and we will be discussing the topic that we have been discussing today. As we said, we're super passionate about how technology can support the humanitarian causes. So this is going to be a really great way of getting people together, like-minded people. We have actually got the World Humanitarian Forum that are joining us as speakers for the event. We will be releasing more information soon, so please do keep an eye out for that information, and we hope that you can join us in London in November. And if this all sounds a little bit too far away, a little bit like you can't wait long enough, and you would like to hear more of Rich and I's voices, we are launching our second series of our award-winning podcast this week. So we will be sharing more details about that with you all, but please do look out for those. And as always, we look forward to seeing you at an event soon, and take care, stay safe. See you all soon. Bye now.
Thank you so much.